and welcome to the World of Football show here on Sports Tonight Live. I'm your host, Mina Rzouki, and I'm joined by none other than Andy Brassell today. It was derby fever over the weekend as, of course, the Clásico took place. Pepe from Real Madrid thought it was the most theatrical Barcelona, and the truth hurts. Meanwhile, Iniesta was offended. The Milan derby was somewhat of a snooze fest, and I don't mind saying that. Meanwhile, there wasn't a Fenerbahce Galatasaray derby, as so many people thought over the weekend, but rather Fenerbahce versus Besiktas. Let's introduce my co-host, Andy Brassell. How are you?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm okay, thank you. All of the matches, did you even watch them? Classique, Clásico, derby, Milan derby?
It was difficult. So what I did is I watched Fenerbahce and then El Clásico at home, nipped out to a Portuguese restaurant for Porto versus Sporting, recorded the Milan derby and Marseille versus PSG, got all the way through, ignoring Twitter, not knowing the results, so I could react to it in a normal way as if I was watching it live.
Yeah.
And I got an email from Dastardly L'Equipe just before I was about to watch Marseille versus PSG saying, watch the highlights of this 2-2 draw on our website. Actually, you're not allowed to because you're not in France.
You're joking.
So they disturbed my viewing for no reason.
I hope you clicked unsubscribe to these emails.
I've boycotted them all week.
Oh no, that's so awful. That's what I do with all the games that I missed as well. Because I started sort of midway through the Clásico, I switched over to the Milan derby, and I recorded half. I really don't know why I did that, you know. So I really should have not bothered with the Milan derby.
But it had its merits, as I'm sure we'll discuss in a while.
We will. But let's start with the actual most entertaining derby, and I don't mind saying that, the Clásico. But I want to talk about, I'm not going to go through the tactics, it was so like 4 days ago now. But what do you think about that comment that Pepe did say, that they were theatrical? It's been going. Iniesta's replied and said, well, you know, I think that's absolutely absurd, him saying that. You know, he should have just left it at that. It was a bit offensive. I've taken great offence to it. Although I do think it's a bit of a dive, let's be honest. And then he's retaliated and said, oh, if you took offence, then the truth hurts. He's retaliated again, Iniesta. It's just back and forth.
Well, I guess familiarity breeds contempt, because when Andres Iniesta comes out and reacts to something like that, it's extraordinary, because he's such a mild-mannered gentleman. It rather recalls that press conference last season where Pep Guardiola just started swearing at everyone and going, Mourinho is the bleep, bleep, bleep master of the press conferences. He's the champion of the press conferences. It was a bit like that. But I think with Pep, it's so much the monster that Mourinho has created. You know, he's created the siege mentality for a very long time. His tactics have been, and I know you don't want to talk actual tactics, but this is part of Mourinho's tactics, particularly in these games, to go, you know, get in the face of everyone. Benzema before was disciplined for saying he didn't want to talk about the referee when they were told to slag him off and say what a dreadful person he was in the mix zone afterwards. And it was funny. I remember reading something about I think it was Aitor Karanka, the assistant at Real Madrid. He was in Richard Fitzpatrick's excellent book El Clásico. He was saying Karanka was told when Mourinho was suspended from the touchline, get after the fourth official. Every decision, get in his ear. And he was like, well, that's not really me. I don't really want to do that. So he didn't. And then Mourinho at half-time said, what are you doing? I told you to get out after the fourth official. So he was going up to him and going, do you know what time the supermarket's open to? Where are you going to dinner afterwards? And Mourinho was there going, good. He's putting pressure on him.
Oh my God. So basically, is it any wonder that he has no time for tactics? How can you do all of the things that Mourinho does? You know, get people on diets, yell at them, sort of.
It's like being in a cult, isn't it?
And there's that new thing that's come out now in the newspapers of how he puts freeze frames of all the incidents, like anything that they've done wrong or how they've conceded a goal. If there's been a mistake on the field, then it's a freeze frame, it's a photograph, and it's put on the wall of shame in the dressing room.
Yeah, it's extraordinary business, but this sort of visualisation seems to be quite a psychological tactic nowadays. Someone was telling me, really?
Yeah, with my, if ever I got a B in class, he would put it up and be like, why?
Really?
And I have to explain myself.
Did
why I'm
that
so
work for
intelligent
you?
now. It does make you not want to see that again, so you do try harder.
But yeah, in the dressing room at Manchester City, they have each player above their peg, a picture of them scoring a great goal or whatever.
Oh, happy memories.
Not above Jolie and Lescott, I don't think.
But then let's talk. Do you think that Casillas' picture would have been there? So what kind of evening was that? Although I've never thought Casillas has really been great at free kicks. I remember Del Piero doing a great number on him in the Champions League a few years ago. Is it that just Messi was just an outstanding free kick taker, or do you think Casillas really messed up?
I don't think he covered himself in glory. I don't think it's a terrible mistake. But I don't think it's quite developing into something yet. Like, say, another great goalkeeper, David Seaman, had a clear difficulty in picking up shots from distance, and that's something that progressed through his career. I think it shows that there's no limit to how much you can improve, because I think if you look back at Jonas, his equaliser for Valencia, for example, the miscommunication between Casillas and Pep earlier in the season, what that was like, I think their first home game of the season. I think it's something that you need to look at, but I don't think, there's no perfect goalkeeper out there. But I think, well, I think you have to identify those areas that you're struggling with and go back and work on them.
But then I can remember Cazorla.
But it was still a great free kick.
Cazorla in Malaga last season in that wonderful free kick that, once again, Real Madrid couldn't deal with at all. But that probably has a lot to do with their marking as well on certain occasions.
Yeah, no, like, they've changed the format of their defence, haven't they, with Sergio Ramos moving into the middle. So, you need to rebuild that trust, that communication.
But who do you think that should have won it, or do you think it's fair that it ended in a draw?
I think a draw's probably just about fair enough, but I think given the start, there may be a twinge of regret from Real Madrid. I think Barcelona will be very happy with the point, put it that way.
Well, you see, based on the second half performance, I thought Barcelona should have taken it, and I thought Montoya did a wonderful job hitting the crossbar there.
Yeah, he was terrific.
He was really terrific in that role, and really showed up Alves. But we've got David Cartledge with us. Hello, David. How are you?
Oh, well, thank you.
Okay, we wanted to ask you, obviously, about the Clásico and everything that's happened afterwards. What about the Dani Alves and Montoya the substitution? Now, apparently it was to do with the fact that Alves was injured and taken off, and then he got a little bit angry about it. But others are saying that it was a tactical decision. Which is it?
I think it was tactically. I think it was definitely a tactical decision. There's been calls for a while now for Montoya to get his chance. I mean, the last couple of weeks, especially, and it became prevalent there that Montoya should have been in. I think he offers a bit more stability at the moment. Alves is certainly off form, for whatever reason it may be. He's certainly off form, and I think it's time Montoya gets a regular run in the team.
So is that it for Alves, or when he comes back from injury, will he see Montoya actually taking his place?
I don't think it's it for Alves. I think he'll, I just think he maybe needs some time off. He's played a lot of games. He plays very aggressively as well. He's covering that the full length of the pitch there on his right side, and he cuts inside a lot as well to join the centre of the attack. But so yeah, I think he needs a bit of a rest, and then give Montoya a chance and maybe readdress things in the summer. How Alves has reacted to maybe losing his spot.
David, they did start slowly, Barcelona. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Do you think leaving Alexis out was an error, especially with the way he played against Benfica in the week?
I totally agree. Yeah, that's something. It's something again it's been talked about a lot. So yeah, certainly.
And do you think that it was a case of, speaking of Alexis Sanchez, I actually remember his best game being against Barcelona sort of last year. Was it a 3-2 victory? I don't remember now. But it was definitely Barcelona scored 3, and they were going centrally at the time. It was almost like he was playing as a number 9, effectively, ahead of Messi. Would you say that's the best role for him? And why didn't they try doing that again this time round?
Yeah, I think that's the idea. I think it's something they should maybe put in as Messi just playing behind him as the number 10 and Alexis as the 9, because he can certainly stretch defences that way with his running, because his movement's fantastic. If you watch Alexis, his movement is wonderful. I think people are expecting a lot more from him in terms of goals, but his movement, like Pedro for instance, provides a lot for Barcelona. And I think it's only a matter of time before the end product comes with Alexis. He's fantastic. I think there's people writing him off already, and it's bound to happen.
Okay, Dave.
But no, I definitely think that 9 position is his best area.
David, for some reason, my producer has started to say that you were losing your voice at the moment, so we'll pick up with you just in a few moments, just until we get the technical error resolved. Wanted to ask you though, do you think that Alexis Sanchez should be starting for this team, or do you think that he sort of deserves to be an impact player only?
No, I thought he was excellent from the start against Benfica. Like I said, I was
that was like one game, and how many that he's been doing so badly about. He was really rather terrible against Sevilla.
Well, yeah, but I don't think there was a million miles difference between Real Madrid's performance at Sevilla and Barcelona's. Just Barcelona managed to come on a bit stronger towards the end of the game, especially after Medel was sent off. But I think, you know, that game showed, you know, it was a big Champions League game in front of a big crowd. And Alexis was fantastic throughout that. And if you think who he was facing, because he was mainly on the left, Maxi Pereira, who is a really, really great right back. And in Dani Alves, at his best style, Maxi is someone who has 5 lungs, I guess. And Alexis completely wore him out. And in the end, when he was making the runs forward, he couldn't manage to get back, and Alexis had even more space to exploit. And that's the space, in fact, that Cesc exploited to score the second goal out there.
That's true. But let's talk about another Madrid team that's doing an outstanding job at the moment, which is, of course, Athletico Madrid. David, do we have you back? Can you hear us now?
Yes, I can hear.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so El Cholo has come back. I mean, he did a good job with Catania at the time with Serie A. He did a great job in Argentina. So what is it about him? Like, I always thought that you basically need to have a coach that sort of epitomizes the character or the philosophy of the football club. And Atletico are a sort of, not a dirty team, but one that's really aggressive, a warrior-like team. And he's come out and brought all of that in them. Is that the reason behind it, or is it really just a question of tactics?
I think that's got a massive thing to do with it. Luis Aragonés has always said that Atleti never had that pride in the shirt. I know it sounds very basic, it sounds very, I don't know, almost British in the way I'm saying it, but that was something for them. They never had pride in the shirt. There was always a bit of a weak mentality with Atleti. And when Simeone came in, he sat with everybody who was at the club at the time, and he said, look, if you don't want to play for this shirt, this badge on this shirt, you can leave this club. Jose Antonio Reyes was one of the first to go because they weren't really sure whether he really wanted it, so he went. But the rest of them really stood up for Simeone. He said, look, you've got to play for this badge, you've got to play for those supporters, you've got to make Atleti great again. Sounds very basic, but it's worked unbelievably. And then, of course, he's been very astute tactically as well. The team works wonderfully. I mean, it's not just a Falcao, it's not just Falcao and a supporting cast. It isn't that at all. Atleti now are a team. There used to be Aguero and Forlan in a supporting cast, but now they're a full unit working together.
I accept that he's brought something out of players who may not have shown their best before, like Mario Suarez, especially Arda Turan, players like that, David. But how long do you realistically think they can keep it up? Because it's clear that there's still institutionally a problem with the club, and that's not something that's going to change overnight. Do you think Simeone really has that support to build and make them consistent over an entire season?
Yeah, again, it's going to be a difficult one for him to manage because they lost numerous players in the summer, like Salvio and Diego, who were replaced, but perhaps not replaced with that level of quality of those players who left. And he's going to have to be. It's going to be a real testament to see how he can rotate and manage fight domestically in the cup and of course in Europe as well. It's going to be very, very, very difficult for him. But I think they've got a good depth there. Raul Garcia's come back from Osasuna. He's one of those squad rotation players who'll come in and out the squad, out the team, and he's performed well so far. So I think the main strength that Simeone has is motivation. So he needs to make sure he gets the most of that, drilled over to the players basically, and hopefully that will carry them through. But that's the problem with a lot of teams. They don't have the depth and the motivation, and that's what halted Emery last year with Valencia.
Yes.
Motivation factor.
Sorry, David, I'm going to have to let you go just because we've run out of time on this occasion. But do speak to us next week. Okay. That is all we have on Spain. If there's ever a team that's showing pride, it's Atleti now. Second highest tacklers, second highest amount of tackles performed in La Liga, and the least amount of shots conceded. What are they doing right? Let's move to Italy next. See you in a bit. Hello and welcome back to the World of Football show. And now we've moved on to Italy. Now, okay, so the Milan derby, this is Milan, the most successful European city when it comes to football. And then this is the fixture that everyone looks forward to, you know? Yep. But this, I have to say, this was terribly, terribly mediocre. Now, if you look at last season, and Maicon scored that wonderful goal at the end, and it was sort of the time that Milan relinquished their, you know, opportunity to go for the title against Juve, it was still exciting, you know, Ibra, Wesley Sneijder, whatever. Maicon, now it is something of, you know, a sort of dwelling in a pit of mediocrity, really. That's what it is, sort of.
It was fascinating as well that it unfolded on the same night as Marseille versus PSG.
Which was just better, which was better.
Because, yeah, and because Ibra so shone in that, and because Thiago Silva was really quite bad in that, but you still got the impression he would have prevented Samuel's opening goal. So there was a kind of, I guess, bittersweetness to it or just bitterness to it, actually, for Milan fans, because they went on and lost.
But this is the thing, you know, what I don't understand about it is that Milan had the majority of possession. Inter only had 33% possession. It was all about Milan attacking. And yet, you know, whatever they did create was sort of nothing really special.
Handanovic didn't have loads to do.
No, exactly.
There's no doubt about that.
And they have no star striker. They have, you know, the few chances they did create, no one could actually do anything with that. Montolivo was their special player.
He had a very good game, actually.
He had a great game.
And
his goal should have counted, or I think personally it should have counted. What about you?
Yeah, it should have done. I think it was a really poor decision, although I'm a bit sort of sceptical about saying, you know, because he did clearly put it in after the whistle had gone. And, you know, the chances are he would have put it in if the whistle hadn't gone, but, you know, you just don't know. I felt sorry for him because he was... You know, there was so much creative burden on him. And I think it's a point you've made before, actually, the fact that, I guess, the figurative idea of having Kevin Prince Boateng in the number 10 shirt, he's a very fine player, but if the creative impetus is on him, it's not really happening. I think it shows the poverty of the side. I mean, he can be a very good player in a good side, but when he's expected to inspire, I think that's a bit more difficult. I don't think he has quite that level of quality, and on the night he had a very poor game.
This is the thing. My problem with this is that Montolivo, although I think did a very good job, but generally him as a player, alongside Nocerino, alongside Kevin Prince Boateng, need great players alongside them to bring out the best that they have. And I think that, for example, of Juan Mata, which is why I think he's doing so well this season, is he's surrounded by like-minded players. I think that's the same of these Milan squad. And they don't have these great players next to them that can bring out what, say, Seedorf could bring out in his teammates.
That's the thing, isn't it? Are we building up Montolivo just because he's the best of
a bad bunch
there is, and it's like we're building up Pato in our minds as well, because, you know, we're thinking someone's got to be Milan's forward saviour, but, you know, he's had a lot of fitness problems in recent years. He's struggled with consistency.
He's too old now
to not quite developed.
Fulfill the potential.
You wonder if he's a little bit too muscle bound as well. I think there's definitely some physical problems with him that you would have expected Milan Lab to have addressed.
But honestly speaking, Allegri, the person who depends on Bojan up top and who thinks Kevin Prince Boateng is the man who can handle the creativity, I really don't see how this is the man that's leading Milan and is the coach. Now, at the time, there was all these, you know, all of these rumours. I spent quite a lot of my weekend with Sky Italia correspondents who were saying that he simply had no effect on the dressing room last season, and it was Ibra that had was choosing the team, was the master of the dressing room, and effectively they had to get rid of him in order to sort of empower Allegri.
Yeah.
But then, was that just like the worst move? Because I really cannot see Allegri. Now they're chasing Guardiola. They're making a very...
Is it worth empowering Allegri, are you
basically,
saying?
Is it worth empowering Allegri? And now that you're making it so obvious you're going for Guardiola, you know, if that's true or not, for me, I don't think that's true, because I'm not entirely sure why Guardiola would accept 6 million. It is net, but it's still 6 million when I think he could probably get more from the likes of Chelsea and other places. And a Milan squad that's skint, that has no money to spend.
It would be an incredibly difficult job for him. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But I suppose the reason it might appeal to him is because it's pretty much a blank canvas. You know, they have to start from the beginning again, because, as you were saying, like, whatever the reasons of getting rid of Ibra, and we have to assume it's largely financial, because he can do so much on his own, he doesn't encourage teams to play great football. And they got away with playing some absolutely lousy football last season because they had the best centre-back in the league and they had the best centre-forward in the league.
No, you're right, actually. And now he's come out and said, which is, I think, very unusual for him, but this is the quote: "I love Milan. I liked it and I felt at home there." Of course you were picking the team. Of course you were home there. "Often you do not go back to where you were, but Milan, I can imagine. This is a fantastic club. I want them to succeed in all competitions. I hope that the club will be better. But if they need help, they know where I am."
But they can't afford me.
Who can afford him? Of course, that was a huge, reason why that he left as well. I mean, just saving on his salary and everything like that. But what a person to let go of. What a wonderful striker. 180 million collectively. He's cost all his clubs now. Is that the most of any other player in the world?
It's extraordinary, and the guy's a winner. There's no doubt about it. I spoke to him after the Porto versus PSG game last week, and what I find interesting about him since he's gone to PSG, he's almost taken on this leadership role. He said, this is not a team like Milan that's used to being in the Champions League, so they have to look up to me. And I think he's kind of like developed that responsibility from being put upon at a succession of clubs. If you take out Barcelona, it was so vital to Inter. Again, they didn't play a lot of phenomenal football.
No.
And
but you see his lands under wonderful coaches as well.
He's equally a curse and a blessing.
Yes,
really, isn't he? But yeah, it's fair to say that Milan have to start from scratch. And you think there are not a lot of big clubs where Guardiola, if you take the finances out of it, there are not a lot of big clubs where Guardiola will get a chance to start from scratch. So
no, that's true. That could be the appeal of it.
Might be the appeal from that perspective.
That's true. And a quick mention I have to say to Stramaccioni, because I think that, despite the fact that they were very defensive and negative-minded, he played to win in that
and
sort of...
he probably did as much running as any of his players up and down the touchline.
Yeah, he was going mental, which I've never really seen him do.
That's what happens if you have a coach in your 30s.
Well, now we're going to see Villas-Boas do more of this as well. But let's move on to Juventus, who, of course, won again. We just have to talk about them because they are topping the table alongside Napoli, who sort of, again, both of them sort of won against Udinese and Siena, respectively. But it was almost a sign of maturity as opposed to overpowering control and wonderful play. There were games that they would have both probably drawn last season, but they are both winning this season.
Perhaps.
What do you think is
I would hope that Napoli last the course, and it's a battle that will go on and on for the season, because it would be a fascinating one. And,
do you think they can?
I'm not convinced, to be honest, but I would like to. I would like to think they could, because it would be an interesting narrative, given that it all started with the Super Cup and all the hubbub around that, and the fact that Napoli didn't really want to play it there then. I think to go on from that is quite interesting. But as well, it's interesting about what you say about how they really ground out those results. Neither were hugely convincing. I think Juventus particularly, at Siena, that was everything they're about, really. The way they came through after conceding the equaliser, I mean, it's typical of everything we know they've got spirit-wise.
Yeah, that's true. Hello, can you hear us? Tancredi Palmieri, our Italian football correspondent.
I can hear you guys, I can hear you.
Are you out on the balcony to scout for women?
No, I'm in Rome, actually, not in Milan this time. And I'm in this place because I wanted to show you that building that for you can't count nothing, but was one of the buildings where there was the biggest celebration for the Roma Scudetto when it happened 11 years ago. In his place, even if it's not St. Peter's or Coliseum, for Roman people, that is anyway an important building because it's where the history of Roma started, one of the places where the history of Roma started.
Well, Zeman managed a clean sheet for once, so perhaps another Scudetto this season?
No way. Save your money, it would be much better for your holiday and for your bank account. No way. No, at least it's upgrading. And actually everything started after he excluded De Rossi, Osvaldo and Burdisso for saying that they were not probably believing as they should have in the project of Zeman. And it's a new start. Happened already last year when, a couple of years ago, when Ranieri actually excluded De Rossi and Totti before a derby, maybe something like a kind of due action to get some result in Roma lately.
Well, you see, I don't know if De Rossi is really a Zeman type of player, so I'm not sure why they didn't cash in on him. I understand that he is probably, in my opinion, one of the greatest players in his role, and what he represents for Roma is more than anyone else. But if you are banking on Zeman, then I'm not sure he's the right player to play for that team.
Well, yeah, I must say that with De Rossi, the tactical misunderstanding lately is quite common, it's quite spread. The thing is that he's not a playmaker. He's not just a pure defensive midfielder. He can do both in a great way. But it depends. I mean, you have to have a tactical elasticity, I would say. And it's also up to what is the need of the team. Last summer, Prandelli needed someone especially to protect the defense and to start the building up, but then to deliver the ball to Pirlo, to Montolivo in the Euro 2012. Now, Zeman wants De Rossi to be there, but it doesn't see him as a pure playmaker. It doesn't see as someone that is staying there. So probably there is also, he need a total special commitment from De Rossi saying, okay, man, I'm here, whatever you will ask, I will do that.
Oh, if only everyone was like that, as if men could ever be like that. But I do want to talk about a Romanista who's now at Inter, and that is Stramaccioni, because I always enjoy your opinions about him.
You're below one.
Since we usually disagree. But now with Stramaccioni's game, I wasn't that convinced about Inter. I did think, if anything, they showed their experience and they played a game in which they knew how to win. But it wasn't anything special, and I think that they were capable of a little bit more attacking-wise. 3 shots on target for Inter side that was so, in my opinion, much better than what Milan is now. Well, why didn't they control the game a little bit more?
Well, for several reasons. Must say that when you are one man down in a derby, it's never easy to control the game. But the thing is that if we look at even at the good performance that Stramaccioni's Inter had along the season, anyway, the stamina, I would say the offensive stamina, never lasted more than the first half an hour. It's a great quality of the attacking game, because I think that the axis Cambiasso, Coutinho, Milito, Cassano, Milito is producing some very nice football up in front, very quick, very straight to the goal, but still it's not lasting more than half an hour. They were one man down, and they scored, most of all, 1 goal after 4 minutes. So after scoring 1 goal after 4 minutes, they couldn't really resist to the temptation of saying, okay, guys, let's just play counter-attack now. Also because it's not that lethal in this moment, the Milan attack. Milan offensive building up was absolutely poor. I can't say other words, but it was absolutely a shame for what is the history of Rossoneri. I spot several defensive mistakes along the game in Inter defense, and I was thinking, okay, now Milan is going to score. Okay, now really they can do less than scoring, and they weren't able. The various Emanuelson, Pazzini, the Robinho himself, pretty helpless. And Stramaccioni, I would say, conceded to that temptation so far. Getting 3 points, considering how Inter started, losing against Siena, losing a goal at home against Roma, getting these 3 points in the derby, and being all in all just -4 from the solid and almighty Juventus and from Napoli, is not just such a bad result, but they need to improve a lot now, a lot.
Tank, what do you think they do when Schneider comes back? Because you could say this really left Stramaccioni without a difficult choice. He could continue to play Coutinho in this big game, whereas if Schneider had been fit, it would have been different. But when he comes back, how do you see him getting on?
Yeah, very good point. That is, I would say, the most sensible point. To me, it's absolute madness when he's discussed, even if Schneider should play. Schneider in this moment is, with Cavani, the most decisive player, and with Pirlo, the most decisive player that Serie A have. So discussing if he should be in the starting level or not, it's absolute madness. It's up to the manager to find the place. As we were talking about De Rossi before, Stramaccioni would like more commitment for Schneider, more sacrifice from him. even in covering. It's not that Snyder is never doing that, but I mean, you need, first of all, the right charisma to push him to do it in that way, because sometimes Snyder is just conceding to the disappointment of not doing the game that he can do. But I would say also that if he plays Snyder up in front, as he has done until Snyder was fit, and that means just behind the forwards, that means over the line of the ball all the time, that would be much more difficult for Inter. Difficult because Snyder would never be able to play the game, to build up the game, but he will have to receive the pass. And because Snyder will always have some 20 meters to run behind.
Tancredi, you always use up all our time and then we can't ask you more questions.
Go on.
I'm so sorry, but we have actually run out of time on Italy, and then I have to now tell you goodbye because we are going to miss you, but we will speak to you next week. You can tell us a bit more about this Schneider business.
I will bring you Stramaccioni live in person here, and we can punch him with questions how much we want.
Oh, I do love Stramaccioni. Okay, we'll see you next week, though. Thank you very much for coming on. Now we're going to move on to a break, and after this, it's more derby action from around Europe. We'll speak to you then. Hello and welcome back to the World of Football show here on Sports Tonight Live. I'm still your host, Mina Rzouki. Now we're going to talk about all the other derbies, and of course the one to talk about was the Classique Marseille versus PSG. So
beautifully pronounced.
I thought so too. Anyway, we won't talk about that.
Carletto would approve.
I think so too. But do you think this lived up to the hype? Like L'Équipe had given it a high rating. Everyone thought it was a wonderful game. But it seemed to me, what really upset me about it is that Marseille really didn't go for the win. They seemed to be very satisfied with the draw at the end of it. Why? Where they had something like, 7 defensive players on the pitch at the end of it.
But I think that shows two things. One, the composition of their squad, which is quite top-heavy with defensive players and defensive midfield players. It was why they could let Alou Diarra go in the summer, for example, to West Ham. And also, I think it shows the scars that they still bear from last season. Because they were terrible in the second half of last season. It was incredibly demoralising period for the club, and how they performed so far was really far above expectation. Those 6 successive wins at the start of the season, but I think the loss against Valenciennes, the heavy loss at Valenciennes, where they conceded some awful goals, really showed that they're not completely over it, and that those 6 successive wins did contain a little bit of luck as well, even if they have improved from the back end of last season. So I think there was a sense of hanging on to what they've got, because I think psychologically a draw's pretty good from that game. Even if they did batter PSG in the corresponding fixture last season, a lot has changed since then. Their means have been reduced, there's no doubt about that. Absolutely. And I think for them to still be on top of the league at the end of that game is a real result.
Okay, we've got Jonathan Johnson on us on the phone at the moment. Can you hear me? John?
Hi there, Mina. Yes, I can. Thank you very much. How are you doing?
Okay, perfect. We have you here to chat all things France. Now, do you think that PSG deserved a little bit more from this, and do you think that they are a bit too dependent now on Zlatan Ibrahimovic and his wonderful goals?
I'm not too sure that they necessarily deserve more from the game. I think the first half was an absolutely fantastic spectacle. I think French football is looking for the best possible way to advertise how much it's improved in the last couple of years since PSG were taken over. Then that sort of first 35 minutes was possibly the best sort of advert they could have wished for, except for the 4-4 draw with Lyon last season. But in terms of PSG winning the game, I don't think they necessarily did enough throughout the match to warrant getting that 3 points. I think that once they took the lead after Ibrahimovic's second goal, then yes, you would have probably expected an Ancelotti side to have been able to hold on to that lead after fighting back from 1-0 down to sort of swing the pendulum their way. But it wasn't to be, and I think Ancelotti's defensive changes in the second half reflected the fact that he actually felt threatened throughout the game by Marseille and their potent attacking force. Both sides created clear chances in the second half to win it Gamero went close for PSG, and Ayew had a fantastic opportunity with a header that he probably should have done better with. And I think Ancelotti probably thought, you know what, a point is not the end of the world here, and brought on a number of defensive-minded players, and players that aren't too hot-headed, and they have experience in those sorts of situations, because I think Ancelotti thought, if we go a man down here, which was a possibility with Marco Verratti on a yellow card, I think he felt that the game would have been lost there. In terms of PSG being over-reliance on Ibrahimovic, I'm not too sure really that they're over-reliant on him. The thing with Ancelotti's formation is, since he's arrived in Paris, he's made the team play his favoured 4-3-2-1 formation. Initially, it was only meant to be a stopgap whilst the team learn how to keep possession of the ball better and retain their control over matches. But now, with a player like Ibrahimovic, who can do a variety of different things in attack by himself, I think he's made Ibrahimovic the focal point of this team, and then built the rest of the attacking talent around him.
Okay.
For example, Ezekiel Lavezzi was brought in amidst much fanfare this summer, and despite the fact that he has had a number of injuries and was suspended, he hasn't actually really played that much of a big role, or not as big a role as many people thought he would play. But I think Ibrahimovic's arrival has actually meant that Ancelotti can keep his favoured tactic, which means now that he's having to accommodate the other attacking talent in the team elsewhere.
Okay, and Jonathan, just a quick one, because we don't really have much time left on this. Now, Mathieu Valbuena came out to say that basically their coach has brought pleasure back to the team in Marseille. Do you think that's what it is, and the reason behind their success, when a lot of people were very upset with the decision to bring him on, considering his sort of historical, forgetting Bordeaux aside, but not really been a great coaching history?
No, he hasn't. I mean, he's been very. He's almost seen as a sort of French footballing equivalent of Peter Reid, and he's come into that job on the back of 2 or 3 years in the wilderness. Really, he spent a lot of time on the couches of Canal Plus, being a pundit, and he's been out of the game for quite a while. So it was a big surprise for everybody. So I can only imagine what the players felt when he was appointed. But I think maybe that sort of appointment has reinvigorated the team, because they had very little or very low expectations before he came in. They'd had a couple of really disappointing months under Deschamps. I think the lack of harmony between Deschamps and the hierarchy at Marseille really affected the players, and the malaise sort of set in. So I think, more than anything, the players just feel liberated under Elibo.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much, Jonathan. I'm really sorry that we don't have more time to chat to you about this, but hopefully we'll catch you at a later date. Just so that we can wrap up sort of other derbies, tell me what you thought of the Porto Sporting Lisbon. I personally love the back heel.
Oh, Jackson Martinez, absolutely fantastic.
What a great player!
Yeah, he did really well.
Really showed himself out.
Yeah, there's been some doubt about him so far because, of course, him being Colombian and a number 9, he's always going to be compared to Falcao, which is completely unfair because they're very different sort of players. Jackson is an obvious replacement for Mark Janko, the Austrian, who's moved on to Trabzon in the transfer window, but he's built like an absolute truck. But
they like these players at Porto.
They certainly do, but I think he's shown that he's got a little bit more to him than that, because, you know, he took the ball from Danilo. He didn't even look over his shoulder before backheeling it back past him.
It was wonderful.
And past Rui Patricio, who is, of course, the best goalkeeper in Portugal. So it was really something. And he worked really hard against PSG in the Champions League last week without really having that bit of luck. So it's a good boost for him.
Do you think, on this occasion, I feel a little bit sorry for Sporting Lisbon, because I did feel that it was a bit too many soft penalties going against them. So do you think that sort of affected the game somewhat and led Porto... I mean, Porto deserved to win, perhaps.
Yeah, they would have lost anyway, I think. But, you know, you could see the galvanising effect of them all getting behind Oceano, who's the B coach who's come up to replace Sapinto.
This could be just the last match.
Who really had to be fired because they're in such a bad place. They've spent a lot of money, which is something pretty inhabitual for them. They're used to bringing
especially
players
with a
through from the
wonderful
youth
youth
academy.
team that they have.
Exactly. And, you know, they've brought, I think, since Godinho Lopes became president about 16, 17 months ago. They've brought in nearly 20 players, not one Portuguese. And I think that's a problem for people ideologically.
Yes, no, I don't blame them. But that is all we have time for on those derbies. It's probably worth pointing out that Fenerbahce won over Besiktas, but is anyone really surprised by that result? Anyway, next up is the international fixtures coming up. See you then. Hello and welcome back to the World of Football show here on Sports Tonight Live. Now we move on to the international fixtures. And we're going to start off with England because Lampard's injured, which possibly could mean that Rooney moves to the midfield. Meanwhile, Patrick Vieira had a lot to say about it. But let me talk about Rooney first, because now he played in this position against Newcastle, sort of just behind the strikers. Do you think that that's what he'll do against San Marino?
It's not such a bad idea, and if you're going to try it out in any game, it has to be this one. And, 98,000 sell-out or not, it should be pretty straightforward.
Honestly, how did this game sell out?
It has to be great marketing. That's all we can put it down to. Cheap tickets, perhaps. I don't know, because I'll be otherwise engaged, so I'm not going. But I think it's interesting because I think long term this is quite an interesting idea for Rooney. He can still zip about when he's 100% fit, but the thing is, it's so rare that he is 100% fit these days that I think there has to be a way of using him to England and Manchester United's advantage when he's not, We think of him at his best combining with Cristiano Ronaldo pre-2009 with Manchester United. But, perhaps that shouldn't be regarded as his strength anymore. And, when he came on as substitute against Tottenham after that injury layoff, obviously he had the bit between his teeth, but he made a huge difference there, huge difference.
No, I understand why this is a great role for him to try, but I still think you miss something, him not being up top. But let's talk about Patrick Vieira's comments, because I agree 100% with everything he said. I don't think the young players are dreaming of playing for the national team anymore. I believe they are not as proud as they used to be. We're talking about the national team that is bigger than anything. He also went on to say that he felt like there was a huge problem with the coaching. And he said, you have so much, I'm sure that there's younger talent, but it's not being properly trained. That's another thing they need to look at. And of course, St. George's Centre now opening up.
Yeah, and that is going to be not like Clairefontaine in France for training new players. It's for training coaches. And everyone knows that's where the problem is. That's where the shortages of qualified coaches. We lag so far in England behind
do you think that's exactly
Italy and Spain. But the thing is, we need to know that it's going to not just produce more qualified coaches, but a philosophy. A philosophy that's going to improve players. But you need to get to the coaches before you get to the players. If you create the coaches, the players will come naturally.
So you think that there is actual raw talent available? It's just not being refined by these coaches who maybe don't have the skills?
No one's born as a genius. It's definitely to do with coaching, and coaching from a very young age as well. Yeah. If we compare ourselves to Spain or Holland or Vieira. I wanted to say about Vieira, actually, it was quite interesting. I remember him going back to Senegal for the first time some years ago when he was still playing with a Sunday newspaper, and he was saying it's the most important thing to play for the national team. He went to the toilet while he was having a cup of tea in his grandmother's house, and his grandfather leant across to the journalist and said, he hates France. He's only doing it for his career. And then he came back from the bathroom, and his granddad was, all right, Patrick, one lump or two.
Oh, my God, that is awful. Oh, well, now we know what he really feels about this and all of those comments.
Still, grandparents are manipulative. you can't get away from that.
Well, let's speak about France, because they've got, of course, that exciting match coming up against Spain, in which a lot of them think that they're going to get thumped. But there's a real sense of if they actually want to make a difference this time.
Yeah.
And Ribery came out and said, well, maybe we were a bit, sort of dumbfounded by how wonderful Spain were in the Euros, and we felt a little bit intimidated. Do you think now, under their new coach, under Deschamps, they're a bit more disciplined, a bit more interested in actually, or a bit more belief really in going out there? And there's no Juan Mata.
Ultimately, I think they'll be more disciplined. But I think it's going to take time. When they played against Belarus, they got the right result. They got there in the end. They kept going even though it looked like they weren't going to score, like the previous game against Belarus, which was the first competitive game under Laurent Blanc in September 10. But they're still a work in progress. But I think Ribéry is a very key factor in this. Now, Javi Martinez, who will be in the Spain squad, unlike Mata, is someone who's been talking about this to the German press. And he said, you know, seeing him in training, I'm actually a bit scared, you know, and Ribéry has been in such great form for the national team as well in recent months, and that is a huge difference. I remember going to the friendly between Germany and France in February in Bremen, and all the German journalists going, we're really worried about Ribéry, and the French journalists going, well, you obviously haven't seen him play for the national team, and he was terrible. We got a little knock. He was taken off at half time. He's really pushed on from there.
Yeah.
And you know, that's something that could make a real difference to them.
Doing marvellously for Bayern too. Although I was a little bit surprised with Mata, and of course Vincente Del Bosque, I always call him Vicente Del Bosque came out and said at the time that it's a question of quantity and not quality, and they just have that many wonderful midfielders that they can't fit in someone like Mata.
And Fernando Torres was saying exactly the same thing in a press conference today. He was just, you know, you're talking about
how jealous are you?
23 absolute champions is very difficult.
This is depressing. It's depressing for a team like Italy as well, who really ought to be back up there. But let's not talk about them. Let's talk about Russia versus Portugal, because of course it's wonderful attacks versus one another. And I've got some stats on this. Not that I'm probably going to remember.
Enough about Elder Postiga.
But Portugal are undefeated in their last 3 against Russia, whereas Russia have never lost to Portugal at home.
Yeah, but there have been some really big thrashings handed out by Portugal. I think in the qualifiers for 2004, they beat Russia 7-1 in Lisbon.
Yeah, but no one's going to think that that's going to happen again, surely.
No, I don't think it will be, especially as Portugal have made heavy weather with minnows in recent times, like Luxembourg, for example. It's interesting hearing you talk about the attacking side of it, because I think Portugal are going to go through some sort of transition. Elder Postiga, you know, people joke about him, but he has done a very, very good job for the national team. But now they've got this guy Eder from Braga, who looked terrific in the Champions League against Galatasaray. He started the season really well, and he's a really heavily built, big striker who can hold the ball up. He's very intelligent. He can go around people. So he's an interesting development, because, of course, Cristiano doesn't really want to move in the middle. From the Russia side, I think you have to look at the fact that Kozhikov is a terrific player, but had a ghastly Euros.
Who's going to win? Just tell me that.
I think it's going to be a draw.
Yeah, oh, come on, that's so on the fence. Quickly, one of them.
It's going to be a draw.
Fine, it's going to be a draw. Anyway, this should be an exciting round of international fixtures, although it does mean that we can't see our clubs play. But unfortunately, that's all we have time for on the World Football Show today. Please can I thank Andy Brassell, who was magnificent as usual. And I've been your host, Mina Rzouki. Do catch us next week. Same time, same place, same football chat. See you then.